So, Jodie, I came across this article the other day. Now, it is an old one and it is from the
Mm.
US, but it was talking about how in a school they had allowed their pupils to get credits for PE by not doing PE, but doing sort of community work and helping around the
Oh,
neighbourhood. And it was really, really popular. And it got me
yeah.
thinking about why is PE so divisive, really? Because you get
Mm.
the pupils that absolutely love it, and you get those like me that absolutely loathed it.
Well, I
What's
remember
your experience?
I didn't mind PE when we were setted, ironically, because
Right.
we self-setted for PE. So we split into two groups, those who
Oh.
wanted to be competitive and those who just wanted to hit a ball about. And actually
Oh.
being self-setted was brilliant because you were with your
Yeah.
friends and you could just have a laugh. And by the end of year 11, the kind of bottom set us would just go for a walk or something. Like their goal
Mm.
was some exercise and fresh air, and that was fine by us. So I liked
Yeah.
it when we could do that, but not when we had the teachers who tried to make us learn the rules of the game and play tennis properly and stuff. I liked being able to just have fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, where I went to school was bang in the middle of the countryside. So we used to do
Mm.
cross country running in the
Ugh.
winter, always in the winter. And we always had there was no, I mean, this is like ancient, this is in the
Mm.
80s. There was no, you couldn't wear tracksuit bottoms or leggings like you
Of
can
course
now.
not.
So it was a short skirt.
Mm.
Um, and the teachers used to drive to strategic points around the run and stand there in their big coats going, "Come on, girls, come on." We would just feel absolutely slighted by this.
Yeah.
Why do we have to do this when the PE teachers have got in their cars
Yeah.
and they're just standing around? So that was something that has really stayed with me over the
Mm.
years. But I would imagine, being as that's like ancient history, PE is quite different now.
It's your own time you're wasting. Ramblings from Beyond the Classroom with Marie and Jodi.
So, as you've probably guessed, today we are discussing PE. So, we of course have a former PE teacher who works with us. Welcome, Damian. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jody. So I'm a former PE teacher, PE and sports science. I was a
Mm.
teacher for 10 years. I started off in a further education college and also taught in
Mm.
a secondary school, did some teaching assistant work and supply teacher work too,
Mm.
and finished up my teaching in an international private school in Germany.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So, first question from me is what's the difference between PE and sports science?
It's essentially just a level. So if we're talking about
Mm.
PE, you're just talking about physical education in terms of essentially getting kids active and playing different games, sports, coming together as collectives
Mm.
to play different types of games and essentially learn how to be healthy. If we're looking at sports science, then you're probably looking at a more chosen subject. Uh,
Yeah.
Usually, there's something key stage 5, perhaps A level.
Mm.
For
Right.
instance, the last thing that I taught in the international school was an IB course, which was on sports science. So obviously that was a
Mm.
KS5 chosen course.
Even the PE GCSE, though, is quite in depth in terms of
Yeah.
biology and anatomy and things like that, isn't it? Because bizarrely, I have taught PE GCSE, yeah, but
That is bizarre.
only the theory end of it, the science bit of it. I was surprised at how in depth it was, to be honest.
Yeah, there are quite a few overlaps. There's a danger of going too in depth and then kind of putting off those who are very strong at the physical
Mm,
side of sports.
mm,
Um, and it's trying to be pitched at a certain part where it's still giving um, kids of that inkling enough, well, as many options as possible for the future. So, from my experience, the GCSE side, I think it's pitched at quite a good level. It does go in depth on certain things, and yeah, plenty of people, plenty of teachers even that are surprised at that kind of level of depth. But I think within that, it also provides quite a nice level of overlap with other subjects, which does provide a certain level of reassurance to those pupils less confident.
So obviously those people who do PE, GCSE or sports science have chosen it, but what about the other kids, the other students? Because in our day, as we were saying, it's a massive source of dread and forget your PE kit, do this, do that. Do you think that's still how it is, or have things improved and changed?
Yeah, I think we definitely still get that for sure. So, I mean, I say like when you get to Key Stage 5, it's usually chosen, although that's not always the case still. So my first teaching job was I taught on a national diploma course in a further education college. But I also taught doing the kind of sporty fitness side on a public services course for students too. So these were students who were going in thinking, oh, I might end up being a police officer or, a fire officer or working in the ambulance, etc. So there was a certain element of fitness to that. Obviously, there's like quite a big sporting scene in a lot of these services, and of course, lots of them have entry-level fitness requirements and fitness requirements for the job. So I taught on that, and one of my first experiences was with one of my first classes. A young lady came up to me. She would have been, I think, 17 at the time, and the first thing she said to me as an introduction was, "I hate PE."
Right.
I hate sports. Very, very cold intro, but fortunately, then I wasn't so immature that I just would, get a bit uppity about it. Like, well, that's my career. I love PE, which I was still young. There is a temptation to be a bit like that, particularly if you've studied it for so many years. You've gone for a bachelor's, you've gone for a master's, and written, fairly complex papers on it, and it is a bit contrasting when you get to that stage. But I just asked her about it. Just asked her about her experience, and it turns out that I mean, we're going back into 2009 now, I think this was. But even then, within the secondary school experience that she had, she told me her PE lessons basically consisted of the teacher turning up with a football. It was mixed class, and then the boys just demanded that they play football. So the boys just ended up playing a match, and several of the girls, she told me, end up sitting out to the side, not really getting involved. So that was pretty much why she hated sport.
So do you think the kind of increased coverage of female sport, like football, kind of obviously had the Women's World Cup, we had Women's European Champions and so on, has that had a positive impact for how women and how young girls take sport?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's huge. It's probably been a little bit blurred for me because, as I said, my last 6 years were teaching in the international school, which is in Germany. And I might be wrong on this, but I feel like they're probably a few years ahead of us in terms of like perhaps female participation, for example. And I think part of that, in my opinion, would be down to the German female national team, women's national team, had been very successful for a number of years. They've won multiple World Cups, and that's been presented positively in the media. So when a woman is participant has made news coverage, it's been in a very positive light, showing. Again, this is my kind of knowledge. It might not be as black and white as this, but showing them playing the sport with a trophy in a positive light, as opposed to what we've had in this country. Not so bad in recent years, but previous years where it's been very negative. And if you have seen, for instance, in the media, females in the media, it's been a real mixed bag, like newspaper wise, etc. So it's not giving a positive, I think, impression, and also it's not been particularly influential to younger generations.
I mean, it's also worth remembering that it's only just over 50 years since women's football was made legal again. There was a ban on it for so long, and I think it was in 1971 that women's football was made legal. So actually, because of that, of course we're going to be a bit behind as a country.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's quite shocking, isn't it, when you find out little snippets of information like that,
I
just
didn't know
Mm.
that. Yeah.
how recent some of these things were.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly does answer part of my musing just then too.
It
Yeah.
is something, sorry to sidetrack specifically onto women's sport, but it's something that I quite often tell all my rowers is like, actually, Henley Women's Regatta was set up so recently compared to everything else. And before that, the only option for women to race rowing at that level was to row against men, which you're already at a disadvantage.
Mm.
That actually we've come so far, and the people who set up Henley Women's Regatta are still rowers. You know, it was in 1988, so it's so recent. It's insane.
Leading on specifically from the female side of it, it does lead
Mm.
into other issues too, like just in terms of representation generally.
Yeah.
You know, as a young
Mm.
person in anything that you want to do or might do, if you have somebody you feel represents you as a role model, then
Mm.
you know, in a greater standing, then it's gonna have a huge effect positively, hopefully, on what you do and choose in the future. So I think that goes into every PE sports lesson too. Um,
Mm.
that, you know, obviously in terms of like having PE teachers who can represent you, however that might be, and also that goes hand in hand with the positive experience within that lesson too. So just to shift another way slightly, uh, part of what I tried to do and part of what we tried to do at my last school was we always said if we could find just one sport or activity which each student was good at or liked,
Mm.
that they could continue throughout the rest of their life to keep them healthy
Yeah.
in that way,
Yeah.
both physically and mentally,
Mm.
then we'd be happy because, you know,
Yeah.
we're starting off with probably a lot more students than we would have liked in a position where they didn't actually have that activity when they came
Mm.
into our
Mm.
lessons. So if we could have found that during those lessons, then we consider that a real success.
Yeah. I must admit, I always wondered when I was at school. I really loved playing tennis. I mean, I was no good at it, but I
Mm.
loved it. Um, so why didn't they just let us girls that wanted to play tennis go and play tennis every PE
Yeah.
lesson rather than putting us through playing hockey, for example, which was not great, and it hurts. It hurts so much. We never had any shin pads.
I also think there's such a change when you get to kind of about 15, 16, I think it is, where you go from actually you should play tennis because it's fun to you shouldn't play tennis because you're not very good at it. And
Yeah.
actually, you should play tennis because it's fun, regardless of whether you're any
Of
good.
course, yeah, of course. And also in PE, and I don't know if this is at all relevant, but we never did anything. Like what I'm finding for exercise I like now is things like Pilates and yoga.
Mm,
We never did anything like that. It was all running about and team sports, and I think maybe there is a place for other kinds of physical activity as well. What do you
So, is
think,
there a better
Damien?
variety now, Damien?
That's a really good point. Yeah, a really good question. It's so there is, I believe, a bit more variety now. We
Mm.
certainly try to include it within our lessons. So I think as we started off, or particularly as I started off in my last position, my last job, there wasn't a huge amount of variety, but we did respond
Mm.
to student feedback,
Mm.
also to what other teachers could offer in terms of extra clubs. And we saw how we could work with the curriculum to actually give a bit more variety, like in terms of
Yeah.
incorporating things like things like yoga, Pilates, circuit training, other
Mm.
kind of fitness-based things. Uh, Perhaps, you know, even to go against the norm, like in Britain, of course, like we've got norms of like boys playing football and then like girls playing
Yeah.
netball, but then,
I
you know,
was
to
going to ask
kind
about
of
that.
like positively target it the other way. So you have a term where the girls play football and whilst the boys are playing netball, for example,
Mm.
uh,
Oh.
just to kind of flip it. So they're still getting the skills that they need, still getting the opportunities that they need, but you're not really pinning anyone down to anything. You're just saying like
Mm.
these are the options, these
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
the opportunities for you in the future, and this is what's available in sport in general.
Mm.
Like, you know, so just go with it and enjoy.
Yeah, because really there has to be something that appeals to everybody, doesn't there? There's such a wide variety of things you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And
What about bringing dance into PE lessons? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, I hated dancing PE lessons.
See, I love dancing.
That's a massive thing. It's so it's something we had in our last school, dance lessons. It's something which I'm very uncomfortable with dance in terms of leading it because I cannot dance
Sorry.
to save my life.
Oh, bless him.
I mean,
I realise you can't see Damian, but he physically looks uncomfortable just talking about this. Like he's pulling at his collar. Just the mention of dance has made him a little bit uncomfortable.
There was a real shift. I had to really change my seating position thinking about it. So I mean, maybe not in recent years, but previous years, if somebody watched me, say, on a football pitch or like playing badminton, they'd say, "Okay, you've got great coordination and you got rhythm with it, etc." But in terms of dancing, oh God, I'm dreadful. But but I mean, I recognise the importance of dance, despite me not being a strong leader in it. So it was something that I did need to learn how to teach, and recognise that then it's about, okay, there are certain things that I can show, and then there are certain things where I need to identify who the good students are first and see that they're comfortable to demonstrate for me.
What's on your mind? Let us know your thoughts, ideas, and anecdotes. Drop us a line at beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk.
We all know that exercise is good for us physically, but do you think there's a rise in awareness of how good it is for you mentally?
Yeah.
I think in recent years, that's definitely becoming the case. Still, we're far away from where we should be in that respect, but so I do believe that there are studies out there. I would need to go back and actually for the links like specifically, but I believe there are studies that do relate or look at the correlation between high performing student performance at exams like the GCSEs, etc., along with those who actually engage in regular kind of fitness or some form of fitness work too. And just from my own experience, that really correlated to, particularly like in previous teaching positions. For one school, we're fortunate enough to have a little fitness suite which these sixth form students could go and visit. We also did our best to provide as many clubs, varied clubs as possible, to get as many involved and engaged as possible. And we quite often saw that those highest performing students, academically, were also those who did come to the fitness suite, 2 or 3 times a week. They're involved in one of the clubs too. And it's, of course, it's just kind of, that's an incredibly small sample size. That's just based on my own experience. But speaking to many other PE teachers too, they report similar sorts of things. So
yeah, and it's interesting that, Damian, because I'm currently teaching a year 11 student who's very, very sporty. He's academic, but he's very sporty. And he feels like he's under pressure to give up the sport that he does after school because he should be revising. I've told him absolutely not to do that. I said you just need to work your revision around those things because it does you good to have a break and it does your mental health so good. But I didn't know that there were actual studies, so I might have a look for those and show them to him. He'll be interested.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really pleased to hear you giving that advice too, because it's again, within my own experience, it's not something which I think is beneficial for anyone really to have to give up like regular exercise because it does provide you with a kind of greater clarity. It helps you put things in perspective. Of course, it helps your general mental well-being, and going into a stressful GCSE exams, then that's just so very important.
Yeah. So do you think, obviously over the last few years, there's been a lot of cuts to extracurricular stuff, drama has been cut, art has been cut, lots and lots of things are getting less and less timetable time. And yet PE, I kind of think, has not had that same effect. Do you think it's because people are aware of the mental, physical benefits? Do you think it's because we have an ongoing national crisis with obesity? Kind of, why do you think PE is one of the few non-academic subjects that's actually resisted the cuts?
Probably just in short, just because of the physical side of that. So in terms of the arts, like the amount of mental benefit you can get from the arts is just obviously that it's endless.
Of
You know,
course,
I love my arts, I love my music, etc. You know, just we're only just now starting to put up some artwork in the house as we've been redecorating, and it's just made a huge difference, you know, to our mental health
Yeah.
like each day. Even small things like that. But just obviously you do get those mental benefits with PE, but of course you get the physical benefits. So you know, if you can instill something again, if we're to teach a student who does, for example, comes and hates PE, actually I'll go back to that student for an example who told me first lesson that she did hate PE. By the end of our 2-year block within that, she actually she messaged me, I think, a few months after she'd graduated from the college course, just to say thank you because she joined up with a rugby club.
Bless her.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
And she'd met a whole host of new friends, like made a good social circle, and really enjoyed the sport too. So hopefully that's something, or that's triggered something which can become a lifelong physical activity to help kind of keep physically and mentally healthy throughout her years.
Yeah, I think you must be. I think the way you responded to her was very open-minded, and I think that's probably a massive thing.
So is there
not
anything...
to just shut down and go, no, PE's good. What are you talking about?
Is there anything that all teachers can do to try and make PE more positive and more accessible?
I think just there's a feeling at times where every teacher kind of fights for their own subject, but you know, we don't need to be so territorial over that. Like, you know, because essentially you're all striving for the same towards the same end goal.
Of
you know, in
course.
terms of that, whether it's a general educational purpose, then fantastic. I guess where PE differs, it's more of a physical sort of thing. You know, obviously, GCSE PE we talked about has lots of theoretical things, and that continues. More so as you go into sports science and if you study at university, etc. But of course, PE is much more physical than any other sport. So I guess then it's a slight outlier in respect to other things. But I think just for any teacher in general, it's always good just to learn about the core elements of the of other subjects, so you can see where your subject overlaps with one another. And I think these, so if you have like a maths week, for example, you know, science week, etc., I think they go a long way to actually helping teachers, students get and kind of project positive impressions of different things. So I always quite enjoyed Maths Week, for example, in the school, because there were certain things that we could input into our PE lessons. So I did like a kind of like a fantasy football style game thing where at the end, if they did play a game of football, then they could add up their points. You know, if they made an assist, they get like 3 points. If they scored a goal, they get 4 points, etc. Then they need to tally it all up and calculate their total score at the end of the lesson. So I think it always helps, and perhaps perhaps you need more things like that so you can actually instill subjects within subjects.
Yeah, I think cross-curricular is really important, isn't it?
You know what? I've just had an excellent idea for an inset day, which all the teachers will definitely love and not hate at all. Right? All teachers have to go through a timetable day and have a maths lesson, an English lesson, and so on. They can pick what lessons.
That is not a bad idea.
But actually, tell you what, if any schools are listening and they want me to come and organise this, just email us at beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk. We will obviously record how it goes for the podcast, but I will happily come and organise a day where I make your teachers pretend to be students for a day.
I actually think that's genius.
I would have loved it.
I would have done it. Yeah, because I think we forget what that experience is like, going from one lesson to another
and having to shift
switching
gear and everything. And like, I remember I used to have PE first thing on a Monday morning, which no human should have to endure, because it was like you'd then do PE, you'd have to get changed really quickly, you'd be kind of a bit sweaty, a bit gross, then you'd have to go sit in an English lesson for an hour
Yeah,
and
with everyone else
think
who's
like an
sweaty and
English
gross.
person. And then you'd have to go to food tech and cook food. And then you'd have to go to DT and source stuff. And then you'd have to go to French and speak French. And you just had to shift gear so much during the day.
The placement is a really good point, actually.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily agree with the words enduring PE first thing in the morning, which I actually quite enjoy myself.
Monday, period 1, no. That should be PPA for all PE teachers by law.
I think there is an issue with this, the getting changed thing,
Yeah,
because it
for
is
sure.
always, you're doing it in 2 minutes flat. You can't have a proper shower. I mean, I don't even know if they have showers these days, but we had showers.
We had showers, but we didn't use them, not unless you wanted to get bullied.
Well, the thing was, you had 3 minutes to get changed.
Yeah.
So you do feel like you're then going through the rest of your day stinky.
Schools can mitigate that. So what we did is we embedded a change time, particularly at the end of the lesson when you might be a bit sweaty, etc., or needing a shower. And also we tried to, where we could, place those periods right before the break. So for those students who did kind of faff a little bit, because you always get those, they would be going into their own break time, so it was their choice if they wanted to take a bit longer.
That's a good idea.
And of course, then you get in terms of the sweating, when you get the year 10 students, they become a lot more aware of it. Then they start dating each other, that sort of thing. So very conscious of their body. Then we tried then to perhaps make that a bit later in the day, or even at the last lesson, so that then they could just go home in their PE kits and they wouldn't need to worry so much about that. They could still shower if they needed.
Idea.
But that's something we learnt the hard way.
Thank you so much for joining us, Damian. It's been an absolute pleasure batting the ball back and forth with you. See what I did there?
Yeah.
And thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Brill, and thank you for joining us, audience. It's been absolutely lovely having you, as always. Remember, if you want to be part of the conversation, you can email us at beyondmailbag@twinkle.co.uk. And Marie?
Don't forget the twinkle has no E on it.
And follow, subscribe on the platform of your choice, and share us with your friends and all that other stuff you meant to do.
This podcast is proudly produced by Beyond. Please bear in mind the views and opinions expressed are those of individuals and may not represent those of Beyond or Twinkle.